Welcome, Traceable Designers. Today we're making the adorable Traceable Designer train valance. This valance includes a center panel, which is the train, and adjustable side panels. You have 3 side panel sizes. You can also make this train with 2 styles, or 2 trains with a connector panel and side panels. It can be made as a single panel over a small window, or you can use it as a wall accent. Pull out your Traceable Designer design form, which is used to make your center and side panels, and you have the 3 sizes for the side panel. You also have style forms that are used to create patches, which will make your train. So this is for the silver streak. You'll pull together everything you need for that, and then just remove the excess from the bottom of your design form so you can use that to trace along the bottom. You have a materials list which tells you everything you need to make your train for your size. So let's begin by sizing our base fabric. This is the line that you're going to use. This is for the center panel. So you're going to make sure you have a long and wide enough panel when this is positioned on the folded fabric edge. You're going to have an area on top that's going to fold over the rod, and then just position your train grill so that you can make sure your fabric is actually long enough. Then cut out all the pieces that you need for the silver streak train. Once you've assembled all those, then you can pull your fabric together. But we're going to begin by making the base. We're going to use the grill on top of the design form to trace and cut out the base panel for your train. All the trains are the same width. They're 30 inches wide. They don't get adjusted because then they won't fit for the train grill. So you want to make sure that when you make adjustments, you make those adjustments to the side panels. So once you've assembled all of your style forms, you're going to pull out your Heat and Bond fusible fabric backing. This is the Ultra Hold only. This is the one that you use for no-sew. So you position that on your fabric, leaving a little margin around the edge, and with the glue side down, a dry iron, use a sweeping motion until you've completely secured that piece of fusible backing to the back side of your fabric. Then you'll probably need to cut a second piece to complete the entire panel. So you can just overlap that a little bit and fuse that on. Keep going over it with a sweeping motion. Don't hold the iron in one place. Allow the paper to cool 100% and then pull off your paper. So since you did an overlap here, you have 2 pieces to remove. So do that very carefully, and then when you get to the place where it's connected, make sure when you're tearing it off, you're very careful with that so you don't remove the glue. You'll see the shiny glue from the overlap. Cut that off because you will use this paper later when you're attaching trim. Pull out a piece of lining, cut it large enough to extend beyond all the edges, and then you're just going to begin in the middle, fusing out toward the sides using a dry iron on a medium or medium-high heat, and then just take your time flattening it out. So you'll be able to tell when it's secured. So check the sides and make sure that's 100% glued before you move on. Then you're just going to fold your fabric evenly in half with the lining side facing out, and then pull out your extra long fabric pins. You're going to secure the fabric so it doesn't move when you trace. Position your design form with the center panel line along the folded edge, and then the upper line will be your cut line. So you want to make sure you have plenty of room above your upper line. Then you're going to position your grill along the bottom so you know how far to trace. So then just trace around the outside edge of your design form, and then when you get to the grill section, realign that, make sure it's nice and straight, and then trace the grill section along the bottom. So that will give you one complete piece. So once that's finished with the folded edge facing you, just follow your cut line to cut out your train base. So you'll just follow around the edges, hold it down with your hand flat so that it doesn't move. So you can see here that you have your train base. Now we're going to attach a grill. So you'll pull out the style form used for the front grill, size off some fabric, and then on the back side of that fabric you're going to attach your fusible backing. Make sure you don't overlap the sides or you'll end up with glue on your ironing board. So position that, make sure it's wide enough, and then just iron down your fusible backing. Now you're not using any lining here. You're actually tracing right on top of the paper because you're gluing that to the bottom. So just trace around your train grill, follow along the edges. This is on the folded fabric edge, of course. And then once that's finished, follow the trace line to cut out your grill. Once the paper is completely cooled, just carefully peel off the paper to expose the glue. Then just position your grill along the lower section of your fabric base, and then starting in the center, moving out toward the side, carefully fuse your grill in place. You might need to adjust it a little bit, but take your time, and then just fuse down the fabric grill to your train base. Next, you're going to pull out the blue ribbon. That is a 3-inch piece of ribbon, and cut a piece that goes beyond the edges just a little bit. We're going to secure that to the upper section, but we have to put the fusible backing on the back side in order to turn that into a fusible strip. So pull out that reserved paper that you used for your base. Make sure you've cut off that shiny section so that the glue does not fuse down to your ironing board. And then just fuse the backing right along the strip of trim. You don't want to overheat this because it will deactivate the glue. And it did move a little bit, so we're going to put a little piece of fusible backing on the edge there. You want that completely covered to fuse that down. So when that's cool, just peel that back, position it across the top. Now you can lower it a little bit so you have a little bit more coverage in the front, because this is going to fold over the rod. You might want to drop it down from the edge about a 1/2 inch, and then carefully follow along, fusing that along the top edge of your train base. And then when that's cool, just trim off any excess from the edges. Next, we're going to pull out the ribbon used for the train grill. You're going to cut 15 strips, 1 in the very center, 2 on the outside edges, and then centered in between for a total of 15. Again, we have to turn that into fusible trim, so just cut your strips and follow along. In this case, you're going to be overlapping strips of fusible backing, so just take your time and fuse that along and cut as many strips as you need until you've covered the entire length with the fusible backing. Then when that has completely cooled, leaving the backing paper on because it's easier to cut, you're going to start cutting strips. You'll cut one long strip for the middle. It's going to go straight across the top of your grill and extend beyond the bottom. You're going to need a little excess down there. So just cut your strips starting in the center, then 2 on the outside edges, and then fill in the center, moving along, making sure they're sized properly with a little excess hanging down. Then once they've all been cut, just remove the paper from the back, straighten them out if you need to, and then just position them in the center and make them even. Once they're perfect and they're all straight, they angle a little on the side, then just place your iron on top to flatten them so they don't move, and then just sweep down until they're fused in place. So you'll do that across the whole grill. Once that has completely cooled, then trim off the bottom section. Next, you're going to put a strip of trim across the top. You want to hide the top edge of all those cut strips. So you'll cut a strip long enough to fit across the top and extend past the edges. Of course, turn it into fusible trim, and then just follow along, covering up the upper edges. If you do need to snip off a little bit, if you have some sticking up, just cut those off. And then just fuse that down completely. Make sure your paper is behind there with the shiny side facing up, because you're going to be gluing that beyond the edge there. And then as soon as that has cooled, just trim off the center so that that's a nice clean side. Okay, now we're moving on to our center nose and our light base. So I'm using a navy fabric, so you want to fold your fabric in half to make sure it's wide enough to fit your nose base and your 2 lights, and then you just fuse the backing to the back and then trace those off. Then carefully cut out your patches, and then you're going to make the center for your lights. You will pull out your sparkle fabric that's included in your kit, fold that in half, and then trace and cut out 2 light inserts using the proper insert form, style form, and then peel the paper back, and then center that light insert right in the middle of your navy base or whatever color you're using. And then with this, you're going to cover this with some lining because you don't want to ruin the sparkle of the insert. So just keep the iron moving, don't use it flat. Just make that move back and forth until that's ironed down. You would have the paper on the back. So now we're going to do an insert. So you need to make it a little smaller, so extend that past the edge. And I'm using a gray fabric, so you'll cut that out and put it in the middle. Now I'm using the excess from the grill here to do this insert. So make sure that it's got enough fusible backing on front and back. If you're going to do that, you could always create a new one rather than using the scraps if you prefer. Then remove the paper from your center nose base and then your second insert right on top, and then just fuse that down. I like to measure it to make sure it's nice and straight, and then just iron that down until that's secured. If it's a little bit off, you can always trim around the edges to make it a bit more even. Now let's make our smoke and smokestack. Pull out your white and black fabric that's in your kit. That's a heavy fabric, so that'll make it nice and stiff. So you're going to put fusible backing down on half so that you can fuse this together. So you can actually turn it either way. You've got the same fabric on the front and back. Peel off your paper and fuse those two sections together. So once you've done your smoke white fabric and then your black for your smokestack, you can make the smoke by going either direction. It doesn't matter because you're using the front and the back. But on the side you're tracing, that would be the back side in case there's any marking on there. So I want mine to face right, so I'm facing the design form down with the face down. And then fold the fabric in half for your smokestack. So then you want to position that right nice and secure below where the smoke comes over the edge and make that nice and straight, because you're going to put a piece of fusible backing across there to attach them. So you can see I'm putting this on top of the paper side because I'm going to move that forward and glue it to the front. So the glue side needs to be traced on the proper side. So then you just cut that out and position that on top, fuse it down. Then when you remove the paper, you're going to position your smoke stack underneath to cover up that glue. So make sure that covers along the top edge, and then just adjust it so it's nice and even, and then you'll just fuse that down. It takes a little while. You have heavy fabric here, so you might want to do it on the front and the back until that's completely secured together. This is a very stiff piece, so it'll pop up above. Now we need to attach the glue to the back of this fused section, so it's very important for the placement here. So you're going to trace across where the bottom of the side smoke falls. It's about 3/4 of an inch from the top of the smokestack. So you'll trace around that section and cut out the fusible backing. Then when you position it on the back, align it with the lower edge of the curled side of the smoke. This way you're not going too far up so that you aren't able to fold your center panel over your rod. So now we're going to mark the back of the finished panel. So you're going to fold that over about 1 3/4 inches, and you want to fold that and then iron it down so that you don't end up fusing anything to that back section. Otherwise you won't be able to fold over the rod. So pull out your trim strips and you're going to make your straps for across the center. I do not have the center nose fused. That's just there for positioning. So you're going to measure that over about 11 inches so it's centered on both sides. And then we're going to make 2 strips and of course put fusible backing on the back side. And then we're going to position those up 2 inches from the bottom and centered so that they fall just underneath your nose. You don't want them going too far under or you'll see those little strips behind. So you'll cut those. You can cut them in a curve if you'd like. And then measure that over so that that falls 2 inches at the bottom of the ribbon and then 2 inches on the center and right behind your center nose. So you'll measure that. Sometimes it moves, just keep checking it. That's 2 inches up, 2 inches over, and 11 inches in, then right underneath where your nose will fall. So now we're going to assemble the train nose and the smokestack. You have to do it at the same time so it all gets positioned properly, and you can see this is folded over the back so that that will pop up. So you're going to align your fusible backing line just below the top edge. You don't want it all the way to the top. Drop that down just a little bit and then position the nose completely centered and a little bit up on top of the strip here, and then make sure both of your side strips are underneath, and then your train smokestack will fall just behind. And make sure it's centered. Just keep checking it and make sure that it is up properly positioned, and then cover this with a piece of lining when you're fusing down. Always keep the iron moving because you don't want to have burn marks. So keep that sweeping motion, don't overheat, and keep going over it until you've fused through the nose section. Move it up and fuse the top section, and you can just keep checking it. Sometimes you can glue it on the side. This works pretty well. It does completely adhere, and you can see that it's attached on top and it pops up on the top. So once the straps have cooled, just trim those off so you have a nice clean edge. and then you're going to peel off the back of your lights. Now those get positioned 1 inch over from the side and then just above the strap. So those you position on each side, and again cover that with your lining so that you don't overheat and you don't make burn marks. Okay, your final step is you're going to add edge trim. So you're going to measure that off. I'm using a 3/8 inch flat gimp trim. It's a braided trim that curves nicely around the edges. And then we need to straighten that out, flatten that by pulling it underneath your iron. And we're going to turn this trim into fusible trim. So you'll cut as many strips as needed to position on the back of your trim. And just like you did for the ribbon, just follow along, overlapping the strips until you've completely covered the back side of your trim. And then once that has cooled completely, then you'll peel that off and begin attaching. So you're going to fold that over the top edge just a little bit, about 1/4 of an inch, and fuse that down. Now the fusing process for the trim is lengthy. You need to warm the trim up, get it to adhere to the edges, and keep going back over it and checking it. It works beautifully. As it gets moving, it warms it up and it starts to curve nicely around the edges. You'll see that you can hold that iron edge pretty long on the trim to get it to heat up and then glue. But don't extend your iron over top of your fabric. That will make marks. So try to keep it right over top of the trim, and then just keep going over it and repositioning it. As it cools, it completely fuses. Now when you get to the corner, it's important that you have a nice sharp curve. So you'll put the point of your iron in the corner and then just bend the trim and then press down and hold that till that completely secures, and then pull your trim straight down the side and do the same thing around the corners. Bend the trim and then fuse it down, and then just move along slowly, pulling the trim. Now if it does not adhere in the right place, just warm it up and move it. You can literally push it around until it cools. Then just finish with a nice point in the center and then up around the sides, and then just secure it behind the back of your valance. Okay, to hang the center panel, you need to attach fusible backing, so I'm using a 1 inch strip of fusible backing. Fuse that along right at the top edge. You want it as close to the edge as possible, and then peel off the paper to expose the glue. To attach the soft side Velcro, you need to peel off the paper. This is very, very sticky. It will stick immediately to the exposed glue. So as you press that down, just push it along nice and flat the whole way. Make sure it's even with the upper edge. You don't want to overlap onto the back. So just pull the paper from behind as you're pressing that down. Try to keep it straight. Once it goes down, it will not be, you cannot remove it. So you want to be really careful with this. And then just snip off the very edge to make that nice and even. And then set your center panel aside, and we'll move on to making side panels for our train. So for the side panel, you're going to do the same thing, size off some fabric, and that's the folded fabric edge. You have 3 sizes for the side panel. In this case, I'm using the small side panel. So I'm going to put that along the folded edge, and then make sure my fabric is large enough with room above the top area for the rod pocket and around all the edges. Open the fabric flat and pull out fusible fabric backing. This will be aligned along the lined fabric positioning marker with your design form. So position that glue side down on the back of your fabric with the open fabric section on top, and then just align the lined fabric positioning marker with the upper edge nice and straight of the fusible fabric backing. You're going to want to have room above the design form also, about 1 inch for tracing, so you want to make sure there's area up there that isn't covered by the design form, and then check to make sure you have the fusible backing below the lower edge of your design form as well. Beginning in the center, using the dry iron with a sweeping motion, just fuse down your fusible backing and then peel off the paper to expose the glue. Now for the lining, you need a very straight edge across the top because you're going to align it even with the upper area of the glue, and then fuse that down straight across so that upper section can make a rod pocket. Then when that's finished, fold it in half and align the lined fabric positioning marker even with the upper edge of the lining, and then position on your sizing line. As you can see, you can do large or medium side panels as well by sliding the design form. So make sure that's lined on the proper line and straight across the lined fabric positioning marker on top. Then just trace around the side all the way down to the bottom, and then you'll trace off your rod pocket area to straighten that out across the top and then right down the side. And then just simply cut out your side panels, follow the line around, holding that down flat, and cut off the rod pocket area to straighten it on the top. Then run an iron across it so that you can see the line, and then split that in half to make mirrored side panels. To add the matching strip to the top of your side panel, just fold that down across the front so you can see the line where the back of the lining begins, and then just mark down 2 inches across, and then you'll prepare your trim or your ribbon for the top section, and then just align that across where the marks are. That's going to fold over behind the panel and also be exposed on the front, and you want it to match up with your center panel. So you'll measure down about 1.5 to 2 inches depending upon how long it is on your center panel. Let that expose or extend past the edges a little bit, and then fuse that down nice and straight across the top, and then attach your lower strip. So you'll cut a strip of trim, and then you'll measure down to the curve. It's about 8 inches, and then you'll mark that off 8 inches. So when you fuse that across, that's going to be nice and straight. That extends past the edges, so make sure you have the paper behind, and then just trim the excess off, and then the excess from the curve. To make your rod pocket, fold the fabric over to meet the lining top edge, but don't overextend past the lining. And then make sure when you add your fusible backing, it stays inside and not over the lining. So then you peel your paper off, and then you're going to fold that over even with the top edge of the lining. So that's a little stiff because of the ribbon, so just take your time pressing that down, make that nice and straight, and fuse that nice and solid so that your rod pocket holds really well. Then the last step, you're going to add trim to your side panels. You'll do the inside curved side first, and then the straight side. So you'll align your ribbon even at the bottom on the curve and just follow the same steps as the center panel. Fold the trim across the back and fuse that down, and then go straight down the side, fold it under on the lower edge to cover the trim edge. Now we're going to add the hard side of the Velcro to the inside curved side of the side panel. So that'll hold when you fold the train over the center and onto the side panels. So you'll put a little 1-inch strip of fusible backing, remove the paper, and then use the hard side of the Velcro right on top of that glue so that will hold. Then you're going to put fusible backing on the back side of your rod. You can use one full 2-inch strip, or use little strips along the center where that's going to fold over. Then just slip your side panels on your wide pocket rod, and then fold the train over to secure to the back of the rod and to your side panels, and you have a beautiful new train valance. Thank you for joining me, Traceable Designers, and remember, you can always make your mark with Traceable Designer.